Picture this. It's November 17th, 2023, and Sam Altman is staring at his phone in disbelief. He's just been fired. Not from some struggling startup, not from some failing venture, from OpenAI, the company he founded and turned into the most influential AI startup in the world. And here's how he finds out. The board sends him a Google Meet link. That's it. No warning, no real explanation, just vague accusations about not being consistently candid. And within minutes, the news breaks publicly and his phone explodes with messages. Now, here's what makes this moment so stunning. 5 days earlier, just 5 days, OpenAI is riding the highest wave in tech history. ChatGPT has 100 million users and the company is valued at $80 billion. Sam has just testified before Congress. He's met with world leaders. He's become the face of the AI revolution. And now, in an instant, it's gone. But here's the thing about Sam Altman, and this is the thread that runs through his entire story. He doesn't stay down. By Friday night, he's already talking about what comes next. By Sunday, Microsoft CEO is offering him a job leading a brand new AI division and offering to hire every OpenAI employee who wants to follow. By Monday morning, over 500 of OpenAI's 770 employees have signed a letter threatening to quit until he's reinstated. And by Tuesday night, less than 5 days after being fired, he's back. Not just back in the building, back as CEO with a new board and with more power than he had before. Now, most people would call this luck, but if you look at Sam's life, if you really study it the way you and I are going to today, you realize this moment isn't an accident. It's the culmination of a pattern that started when he was 19 years old, sitting in a Stanford dorm room, trying to figure out how to get a massive mobile carrier to take a meeting with a kid who had absolutely no business being in that room. And that same kid, he's ended up at the center of what might be the most important technological shift of our lifetimes. And in doing so, reshaping how we think about intelligence itself. And that's exactly what we're going to go into today. So let's dive in. Welcome to Inflection Moments. I'm David Franklin, and you and I are about to dive into something fascinating. You know that moment when everything changes for an entrepreneur? When one decision, one pivot, one breakthrough suddenly shifts their entire trajectory. That's what we're hunting for today. If you're building something, if you're that founder grinding it out, making those impossible decisions that keep you up at night, this episode is for you. Because today, we're going inside the mind of one of the most successful entrepreneurs in history to uncover the exact moments that transformed their journey from ordinary to extraordinary. Here's what we're doing. We're dissecting the 5 most pivotal inflection points in their career, but more importantly, we're uncovering the strategic thinking behind each decision, the kind of insight that separates the builders from the dreamers. Ready? Let's get started. Okay, let's start with Sam's first inflection point. It's early 2005. Sam is a 19-year-old sophomore at Stanford studying computer science. An important context here, this is the golden age of Stanford entrepreneurship. You're in the middle of the Web 2.0 boom. Mark Zuckerberg has just launched Facebook, and everyone on campus is talking about startups. But here's what's happening with Sam. He's not going to most of his lectures. He's not sitting in classrooms cramming for exams. Instead, he's spending his time playing poker, serious poker. And look, this is important because Sam's not just killing time, he's actually learning about something. He later says, and I think this is fascinating, that he learned more about decision-making, pattern recognition, and reading people from poker than any class. The poker games are where he's really getting educated. But then something happens. He discovers Paul Graham, not in person yet, but through his essays. Graham has this essay called How to Start a Startup that basically becomes Sam's Bible. So you know what Sam does? He's Googling how to start a startup, just like thousands of other college kids. But Sam's different. He's actually taking it seriously. And that's when the idea hits him. Sam and 2 classmates, Nick Saibo and Alak Deshpande, they start working on this idea together. It's a mobile app. Nothing groundbreaking on the surface. It lets you share your location with friends. That's it. But here's what you need to understand about 2005. The iPhone doesn't exist yet. Most people have flip phones. GPS on mobile phones is barely a thing. It's clunky, limited, and expensive. And Sam sees something. He sees a future that nobody else does. So getting inside Sam's head for a moment, on the surface, sure, he wants to build a cool app, but it's deeper than that. He wants to create something that solves loneliness. That's how he pitches it. They name the app Loopt, which is about helping people connect in real life by knowing where their friends are. If you think about it, it's like Facebook meets GPS before either of those things really exists in a usable way. But there's something else going on. Sam wants out of the traditional path. He's at Stanford, right, which is supposed to be the golden ticket. You graduate, you get a job at Google or Microsoft, you climb the ladder. That's what you're supposed to do. But Sam's watching everyone around him do the safe thing. And here's what's wild. He thinks that's actually the riskiest move that you can make. And Sam later writes about this. He says, in what is now a very dynamic world, the risky thing is to not go try the things that might really work out. I love that. The risky thing is playing it safe. That's a total inversion of how most people think, but a common thread between many of the episodes we've done so far on Inflection Moments. So Sam's goal is twofold. Build Loopt into something real and prove that taking the unconventional path is actually the smart play. But here's the problem. He's 19 years old. He's got an idea. He's got some basic code, but he has no funding, no connections, no track record, nothing. And mobile location services, they're expensive to build. We're talking about deals with carriers, infrastructure, serious money. And nobody is giving serious money to teenagers. Plus, he's got a decision to make. Does he stay at Stanford and keep this as a side project, or does he go all in? His parents aren't thrilled about the idea of him dropping out. And look, Stanford, you don't just walk away from that. And here's another thing. Y Combinator exists at this point, but barely. Paul Graham and Jessica Livingston have just started this crazy experiment. They're calling it Y Combinator, which is the same Y Combinator we spoke about in Brian Chesky's episode a few weeks ago. The idea is simple. Give small amounts of money to very early stage startups and see what happens. It's the first batch ever, 8 companies total. No one knows if this thing is going to work. There's no precedent. There are no Y Combinator success stories yet because nothing's had time to succeed. So Sam's got to do 2 things. First, he's got to convince Paul Graham to accept Loopt into this experimental program, this thing that might be nothing. And second, he's got to convince his co-founders and his family that leaving Stanford is not completely insane. So here's where Sam's resourcefulness kicks in. First, he applies to Y Combinator. He and his co-founders drive up to the interview with Paul Graham. Now, the interview is supposed to be quick. A standard pitch, nothing special. But it turns into something else entirely. It becomes a 40-minute office hour session. Graham doesn't just ask questions. He starts brainstorming with them. He's engaged. He's interested. And Sam walks out of that room thinking, this is different. These people actually get it. So Sam and his team are in the first batch, alongside Reddit, by the way, which also hasn't accomplished anything yet. But here's a crucial decision. Sam fully commits. He doesn't just take a leave of absence. He drops out at 19. Now, Sam later says he was comfortable with the risk because he could always go back to school if it failed. That's the safety net. But more importantly, this is key, he believed the potential upside was asymmetric. Think about it this way. If Loopt works, it's life-changing. If it doesn't, he still learned more in 1 year than 4 years of college could teach him. Either way, he wins. The second part of this is that Sam needs to get mobile carriers to work with Loopt. And here's where you start to see how relentlessly resourceful Sam is. He's got to build relationships with massive companies. Verizon, AT&T. And here's the thing, they don't work with startups. They barely work with tech companies. These are old school telecom businesses, bureaucratic, slow, and impossible to get into. So what does Sam do? He tries 30 different paths into the company. Think about that. Not just 2 or 3 attempts, 30. He emails different people. He cold calls. He finds mutual connections. He shows up at events. He tries everything. Most people stop after the first ignored email, maybe the second. But Sam keeps going. And finally, one executive at a carrier agrees to take a meeting. And you know why? The exec tells Sam, I'm meeting with you because I want you to stop bothering us. I love that. That's the breakthrough. The exec is annoyed into submission. And once Sam's in the room, he makes the deal. So here's what happens. Loopt raises nearly $20 million in venture capital from tier 1 names like Sequoia Capital, New Enterprise Associates, Y Combinator, for a 19-year-old who just dropped out of Stanford. That's extraordinary. But here's the thing. Loop never becomes huge. It gets 5 million users, which is respectable, but it's not Facebook. It's not the breakout hit because the market timing is tough. They're too early. The iPhone launches in 2007, 2 years after Loop starts, and that changes everything. But by then, Foursquare and other competitors have entered the market with better timing. In 2012, Loopt gets acquired for $43.5 million. On paper, that's a successful exit. Sam becomes a millionaire before he turns 30. But in Silicon Valley terms, it's a modest outcome. Now, most people would look at this and say, that's a decent exit, not life-changing, move on. But here's what actually matters, and here's what most people miss. Sam has now built deep relationships with Paul Graham and the Y Combinator network, and he's learned how to raise money, how to build a team, how to navigate failure, and most importantly, how to stay in the game. He's earned a reputation as someone who doesn't quit, and Paul Graham is watching. Graham later writes something that just blows my mind. He says, Sam is, along with Steve Jobs, the founder I refer to most when I'm advising startups. On questions of design, I ask, what would Steve do? But on questions of strategy or ambition, I ask, what would Sam do? Now think about that. Sam is only in his mid-20s. He's barely achieved anything yet. And Paul Graham is already putting him in the same sentence as Steve Jobs. But it's because Graham sees something that's about to become very, very important. All right, so let's fast forward to 2011. Sam has sold Loopt. He's 26 years old. He's independently wealthy, and he's got one of the best problems in the world to have. He's trying to figure out what comes next. Now, most people in his position, most people who've just sold a company, have money in the bank and at the top of their game, they would do the obvious thing. They'd start another company, maybe become a full-time investor, keep the momentum going. But Sam does something different. He becomes a part-time partner at Y Combinator. On the surface, this might not sound like much. Part-time partner at an incubator, but there's a deeper strategic move here. Sam is staying close to the action. He's seeing hundreds of startups. He's learning what works and what doesn't. He's building relationships with the best founders of the next generation. And crucially, he's starting to shape Y Combinator's thinking on which companies to fund. By 2012, Paul Graham is thinking about succession. He's got 2 young kids with Jessica Livingston. Y Combinator's growing, it's now funding 67 startups per batch. That's up from 8 in the first batch where Sam was a founder. So Graham knows he wants Y Combinator to become something bigger, something that can outlive him. And finding someone who can actually do this is really difficult because Y Combinator isn't a normal company. It's not like you can just hire a professional manager and have them run it. Y Combinator is part incubator, part cult, part philosophy. It's Graham's essays and ideas made real. So finding a successor is about finding someone who can carry that mission forward, someone who understands what Y Combinator actually is. So shifting to Sam for a moment, in his mind, becoming president of Y Combinator is about one thing: leverage. So think about it. If you're president of Y Combinator, you have access to and influence over hundreds of the best startups every single year. You get to shape what the next generation of founders thinks about when they're building companies. You basically get to decide what startups get the golden stamp of approval, that YC logo. You become a kingmaker. But there's also something deeper going on here. Sam wants to prove something. He wants to prove that the unconventional path, the path where you drop out of Stanford, sell a company that's good but not great, can still lead to extraordinary outcomes. He wants to prove that the game isn't just about having one massive win. It's about staying in the game and accumulating influence over time. And look, that's a very different way to think about success than most people do. But there's a problem. Sam has never run a truly successful startup. By Silicon Valley standards, Loopt was a modest exit at 43 million. He's never built a billion-dollar company. He's never been a CEO of anything that really mattered at scale. So why would Paul Graham pick him? There are other candidates for this job, people with more traditional credentials, people who've had bigger exits, people who've been in Silicon Valley longer, people who look better on paper. And on top of this, and there are going to be reports on this later, after Sam leaves YC, that some of the other Y Combinator partners weren't thrilled with this choice in the first place. There were questions about his management style. Was he spreading himself too thin with side projects? Because keep in mind, he'd started a venture fund called Hydrazine Capital with his brother. And here's the other issue, which is maybe more important. The job itself is ambiguous. What does it mean to be president of Y Combinator? What are you actually supposed to do? Graham's been doing everything. He meets with founders, he makes funding decisions, he writes essays constantly. He's the public face of the whole thing. If Sam takes over, what's his actual job? Because how do you replace Paul Graham? But Graham makes the call. Mid 2012, he approaches Sam and he tells him, "You're the guy. I want you to be president." And Sam, he doesn't have a detailed business plan. He doesn't have a 100-page deck about how he's going to reorganize the company. He just says yes immediately because he knows and he understands that this is a once in a lifetime opportunity. When Graham announces the decision publicly, this is February 2014, he's explicit about why he's doing this. Graham says, YC needs to grow, and I'm not really much of a manager. Sam Altman is. That's Graham's way of saying, look, I'm a writer and a philosopher. Sam's a builder and an operator. I can teach people how to think about startups. Sam can teach people how to run them. I can help you think better, but Sam can help you build faster. So what does Sam actually do when he takes over? Because I think this is the interesting part. He doesn't just maintain the status quo. Instead, he expands YC in ways Graham never would have done. First, he hand recruits startup. Now keep in mind, Graham and Livingston never did this. They just took applications. So Sam is doing something different. He goes out and finds companies himself. He convinces them to join YC, even if they weren't planning to apply. As an example, he recruits Helion Energy, which is a fusion energy company, and he personally visits all 4 fusion companies in existence. He evaluates them and he decides that Helion is the best and he convinces them to join YC. That is not something Paul Graham would have done. Graham believed in letting founders come to you, but Sam believes in going out and finding the best founders is a different philosophy. Second, Sam launches new initiatives. You've got the YC Fellowship, the YC Continuity Fund. That's for investing in later stage alumni companies. YC Research. He's expanding what Y Combinator actually means and he's making it bigger. And third, and this one's going to be quite controversial, Sam expands the batch sizes. Under Graham, YC was funding 67 companies per batch. But under Sam, that number triples. By the time he leaves, YC is funding over 200 companies per batch. Now, some people love this. YC is now touching more founders, funding way more ideas, and their reach is massive. But some people hate it. They think Sam is diluting the brand. More than that, they think YC is becoming a factory instead of a carefully curated group of companies, which honestly is a fair criticism, but that's what Sam does. So let me give you the numbers. During Sam's tenure as president, and this is from 2014 to 19, so 5 years, Y Combinator funds over 1,000 startups. The total value of YC companies grows to over $100 billion. Companies that go through YC under Sam's leadership include Airbnb, which was funded earlier but scaled up during this period, DoorDash, Instacart, Cruise, and dozens of others that become unicorns, companies worth $1 billion or more. So during this period, Sam becomes one of the most powerful people in Silicon Valley without ever running $1 billion company himself. Think about that for a second. He's not the richest person in the room. He's not the most famous, but he's the guy that every ambitious 22-year-old founder wants to meet. He's the guy who gets to decide which startups get the YC stamp of approval. He's the gatekeeper. And here's what he's learning during this time, and it's crucial. He learns how to spot talent at scale. He learns what makes the difference between a company that raises a seed round and a company that becomes worth $10 billion. He learns how to advise founders on the edge of burnout, how to navigate board dynamics, how to raise capital, and how to hire and fire. He's basically getting a PhD in how startups actually work, a paid PhD, I should say, where he's also building incredible influence. But most importantly, and this is the pattern I want you to notice, Sam is building a network. Every founder who goes through Y Combinator during these 5 years owes him something. He's created goodwill with hundreds of people who are now running increasingly important companies. These are people whose first investment came from Sam's stamp of approval. So Sam is developing a reputation for something very specific. He's the guy who makes things happen. Not the smartest guy, not the best operator, but the guy who finds a way, the guy who makes it happen. By 2019, Sam steps down from Y Combinator to focus full-time on OpenAI. The official line is that he's transitioning to chairman to work on AI. That's what the press release says. But the reality is more complicated because there are reports later that some YC partners wanted him out because he was spending too much time on other projects. He'd been building OpenAI on the side and it was becoming his main focus. But here's the thing, whether he was pushed out or he left on his own, he left with his reputation intact. And that's important because it's going to matter in what comes next. Okay, inflection point number 3 now, and it's the summer of 2015. Sam is having dinner with Elon Musk at the Rosewood Hotel in Silicon Valley. And they're not just making small talk. They're talking about something that keeps both of them awake at night: artificial general intelligence, or AGI. Specifically, they're planning to spend the next few months quietly recruiting a dream team of researchers before unveiling OpenAI to the world in December. This is a very specific moment in AI history, so it's important to share a bit more about the landscape here. DeepMind, which Google acquired in 2014, is making serious progress on reinforcement learning. And here's what's wild. Google controls about 3/4 of the world's top AI researchers. The big tech companies are hiring everyone. They're hoarding talent, essentially. And there's this growing concern, especially among people like Musk and Altman, about what happens next. What if AGI happens? And what if it's controlled by one company? And what if it's not built with humanity's best interests in mind? Now, Elon's thinking about this from a risk perspective. He's worried about existential threats. What if we build something that's smarter than us and we can't control it? Sam, on the other hand, is thinking about it a little differently. Sam's thinking about leverage. He knows something that's true. Whoever builds AGI will be the most important person in the world. Not rich, not famous, the most important person, the most powerful person ever. And they look at each other and decide, we're going to do this. We're going to build an AI research lab, but not the way Google would do it and not the way Facebook would do it. They decide, let's start a nonprofit. We'll attract the best researchers by offering them something that big companies can't: freedom. Freedom to publish openly. Freedom to work on whatever they think is most important. We'll outbid Google not on money, but on the mission. So they recruit someone called Greg Brockman, who is CTO of Stripe, one of the most successful companies in the world. They convince him to leave. They also recruit Ilya Sutskever, who is one of the world's top deep learning researchers. They put together a list of 10 researchers they want, top tier people, the kind of people Google would do anything to keep. And they get 9 of them. So it's now December 2015. They announce OpenAI. It's a nonprofit, and the founding mission is simple but massive: ensure that AGI benefits all of humanity. And they pledge $1 billion in funding. Now, the actual amount collected is much less, around $130 million over the first few years. But the number doesn't matter as much as the signal. The signal is, this is serious. For the first couple of years, OpenAI is a pure research lab. They're working on reinforcement learning, robotics, generative models. They release some tools like OpenAI Gym, a toolkit for developing algorithms. It's mostly academic, mostly unsexy, mostly unknown outside of AI research circles. So thinking about this from Sam's perspective, what's driving all of this for him? Sam wants to position OpenAI and himself at the center of the most important technological shift of the next 50 years. So think for a moment about what AGI means. If it happens, it reshapes everything: the economy, warfare, social structures, human identity, how we understand intelligence itself. Whoever builds it, or whoever controls the entity that builds it, will have more power than any government, more power than any company, more power than any individual in history. That's what Sam understands. But he also understands a problem. OpenAI, as a nonprofit, can't compete with Google. Google's spending billions on AI research. Facebook's hiring everyone. How do you compete with that when you're a nonprofit that can't offer equity, when you can't promise massive financial returns, when you can't scale your compute budget the way $1 trillion company can? So what Sam wants is to transform OpenAI from a pure research lab into something that can actually compete, something that can build products, generate revenue, attract capital, and win the race. But, and this is crucial, he has to do this without betraying the founding mission, without looking like he's selling out, without scaring away the researchers who joined because they believed in the nonprofit ideal, without the whole thing collapsing under the weight of contradiction. That's a very hard needle to thread. But here's the problem. OpenAI is running out of money. By 2018, it becomes clear that the computational costs of training large AI models are exploding. And I mean exploding, because every 3.5 months, the compute required to achieve breakthrough results is doubling. That is exponential and completely unsustainable. There's a cost structure that makes no sense for a nonprofit that's trying to survive on donations. Plus, Elon's getting frustrated. He thinks OpenAI is falling behind. So in early 2018, he proposes something. OpenAI should merge with Tesla. Elon would run it. They'd have access to Tesla's resources. They'd be able to scale. But Sam and Greg Brotman say no. They don't want OpenAI controlled by Elon. They don't want it controlled by Tesla. That's not the vision. So Elon gets upset. In February 2018, he steps down from the board. The official story is that he didn't want any appearance of impropriety since Tesla is also working on AI. But the real story, he wanted control. He didn't get it, and he walked. So now Sam's got bigger problems. One of the biggest funders is gone. One of their co-founders just left. Their compute costs are escalating. The nonprofit structure is working, and Google is still winning the talent war. Google is still hiring the best people and throwing money at the problem. This is the moment where everything could fall apart. Here's where Sam makes the bet that defines OpenAI. So it's March 2019. OpenAI announces a new structure, OpenAI LP. It's what's called a capped profit entity. So here's what this means. It's a hybrid, still controlled by the nonprofit, but now able to raise capital from investors, able to offer equity-like returns capped at 100 times the initial investment. So think about what he's doing here. He's threading the needle, he's keeping the mission, but getting the resources he needs. Now, this is quite controversial because some of the early supporters feel betrayed. The whole point was that OpenAI was supposed to be a nonprofit, mission-driven, not corrupted by money. But now it looks like they're becoming just another tech company chasing venture capital. But Sam frames it differently. He says, we need to be able to attract capital and talent to accomplish our mission. If we can't compete, we can't build safe AGI. And if we don't build it, someone else will, and they might not care about safety. It's compelling logic. You can disagree with it, but it's compelling. 4 months later, in July 2019, OpenAI announces a $1 billion partnership with Microsoft. And in doing so, Microsoft becomes OpenAI's exclusive cloud provider. In exchange, Microsoft gets to integrate OpenAI's models into its products. This is the turning point. Sam has just transformed OpenAI from a scrappy nonprofit into a company that can raise real money, offer real equity, and compete with Google. The capped profit structure is his way of keeping the mission while getting the resources he needs. If OpenAI works, it's not just big, it's not just Airbnb for X, it's civilization scale. It's the most important thing happening in technology. And if it doesn't work, he's still young enough to do something else. He can always go back. That's an incredible amount of confidence to have and enormous pressure for one person to deal with. So over the next year, something happens. In May 2020, OpenAI releases GPT-3. So to give some context here, GPT-3 has 175 billion parameters, orders of magnitude larger than anything before it. It can generate text that's almost indistinguishable from human writing. It can translate languages, write code, summarize documents, explain concepts. It's shockingly good. But Sam later says that when they released GPT-3, most of the world didn't care. Most people didn't understand what had happened. They had no idea. But Silicon Valley got it. Startup founders were like, oh, this is AGI. In reality, it's not AGI, but it's pointing at something real. So fast forward to June of that year, OpenAI releases GPT-3 via an API. At first, the only companies that build real businesses with it are doing AI-powered copywriting. It's cool, but it's not transformative yet. But here's what Sam notices, and it's crucial. People love playing with GPT-3 in the OpenAI playground. They love talking to it, even though it's not designed for conversation. They're spending hours just typing things and seeing what it says back. That single observation that people want to talk to AI, they want a conversation, that observation becomes the seed for ChatGPT. But we're going to get into that in the next inflection point. For now, here's what he's done. He's turned OpenAI from a nonprofit research lab into a real company with a $1 billion partnership with Microsoft, with a structure that can raise capital, with a product, GPT-3, that's captured the imagination of researchers and developers. He's positioned OpenAI to compete with Google and Facebook, not as an academic lab, but as a serious AI company. But most importantly, Sam has survived the transition. The nonprofit mission hasn't been totally abandoned, it's just been redefined. The original believers might be skeptical, but the new structure allows OpenAI to actually build something. Okay, time for the iconic moment when Sam made the world stand still. It's late 2022. OpenAI has released GPT-3, then GPT 3.5. They've released DALL-E, an image generation model. They're making progress. They're publishing papers. They're getting respect in the research community. But here's the thing. They're still mostly known just inside Silicon Valley circles, not to the general public, not to regular people. To most people in the world, OpenAI is basically invisible. Inside OpenAI, though, there's a debate happening. They've built these incredible, powerful language models that can do things that seemed impossible just a few years earlier. But most people can't access them. The API is for developers. The playground is for tinkerers. It's for people who know how to code. So the question remains, how do you make this accessible for everyone? Some engineers are skeptical. Building a simple chat interface feels too basic, too obvious, not worth the time. It's just a wrapper around GPT-3. There's no innovation here. There's no breakthrough. But Sam has this intuition, and intuitions are interesting because they often come from observation. He saw the playground data. He saw how people were using it. People weren't using it the way it was designed. They were having conversations with it, typing prompts, reading responses, spending hours just talking to the AI. So Sam thinks about this. He acknowledges that people don't necessarily want the API. They want to be able to talk to AI. They don't want to write code. They want a conversation. That's what they actually want. So Sam makes a call. We're building a chatbot. It's going to be free. It's going to be dead simple. No bells and whistles, just a text box where you type and the AI responds. So it's crazy to think about this, but the team builds ChatGPT in a matter of weeks. It's basically GPT 3.5 with a chat interface and some fine tuning to make it more helpful and less prone to generating harmful content. That's it. That's the entire innovation. So now, here's the big moment. November 30th, 2022. ChatGPT goes live. And here's what's interesting. There's no huge marketing campaign, no glitzy keynote, just a simple blog post and a tweet. We've launched ChatGPT. Try it here. That's it. So getting into Sam's head for a moment, what's happening here is that Sam is looking to change the entire conversation about AI. He knows that most people don't understand what these models can do. They basically think that AI is Siri, which is obviously bad, or self-driving cars, which are far away, or something that might happen someday, something abstract or theoretical. The reality is that most people don't know that AI can write essays, debug code, explain complex topics, and be creative. They don't know any of that is here, that this is right now. But there's something deeper happening in Sam's mind, and it's more strategic than this. He realizes that OpenAI needs to own the consumer relationship. If they build a product that people use directly for an abundance of use cases, then they're a platform. They're not just enabling others to build companies on it. They are the lifeblood of each and every organization. So Sam is betting that a free, simple chatbot will be the thing that finally makes AI click for regular people. Not developers, not researchers, regular people. Everyday people who have no idea what machine learning is. That's a big bet, and it's a bold one. But here's the problem. A lot of Sam's own team don't believe in this. Greg Brockman, OpenAI's president and Sam's closest ally, later admits something. He says most engineers, including me, oppose building a simple chatbot. We thought it wasn't worth the time. So keep in mind, most of the engineers building this, including his own president, they don't believe in this. They're thinking, why on earth would we spend engineering resources on this when we could be working on GPT-4 or DALL-E 2 or actual innovations? Plus, there's risk, real risk. If ChatGPT launches and no one cares, it's embarrassing. OpenAI has built all this hype around GPT-3, supposedly the most powerful model ever, and now they're releasing what's essentially a simplified version in a chat interface. If people don't get it, the narrative becomes OpenAI is out of ideas. And there's another risk, a different kind of risk. If you make a powerful language model accessible to everyone with no barriers, people are going to use it for bad stuff. Generating spam, writing phishing emails, creating disinformation, and spreading lies. And this makes the safety team nervous. They're worried about what happens when this gets into the wild. But Sam overrules them. And he says that we're launching it. So back to that famous date, November 30th, 2022, and ChatGPT goes live. Within 5 days, it hits 1 million users. 1 million users in 5 days. To put that into perspective, Instagram took 2.5 years to hit 1 million users. TikTok took 9 months. Facebook took 10 months. And ChatGPT does it in 5 days. By January 2023, just 2 months after launch, ChatGPT has 100 million monthly active users. It's the fastest growing consumer application in history. Again, that's worth repeating. The fastest growing consumer application in history. The internet explodes. People are sharing screenshots of ChatGPT writing poetry, solving math problems, explaining quantum physics like you're 5 years old. Students are using it to write essays. Programmers are using it to debug code. And therapists are worried it's going to replace them. This is not some slow, gradual adoption. It's viral. It's one of those paradigm shifts where the internet discovers something and collectively loses its mind. Now, here's where Sam does something that no one else is willing to do. He makes it free and frictionless. No sign-up required, at least initially. No API key, no credit card. Just go to the website and start typing. That's it. That's all you have to do. This is the opposite of what most tech companies do. Most companies would have immediately launched this as a premium product, gated access, invite only, make people beg to try it. But Sam says no. We're going to fully open this up. We want everyone to try it. We want it to spread. And the virality is insane. Every person who uses ChatGPT tells their friends. Those friends tell more friends. It's pure word of mouth. OpenAI spends basically nothing on marketing because the product markets itself. But here's the other thing Sam does that's crucial, and this is genius level thinking. He frames ChatGPT not as a finished product, but as a research preview. The landing page literally says, this is a research preview. It will make mistakes. Help us improve it. Now that is genius framing because it lowers expectations. People aren't upset when it gets things wrong because it's a research preview. It's allowed to be imperfect, but it also creates engagement. People want to help improve it. They're reporting bugs, suggesting features, sharing feedback. OpenAI is getting millions of data points on how people actually use AI. It's crowdsourced product development and it's brilliant. So fast forward a few months, it's now February 2023 and ChatGPT has over 100 million users. By March 2023, OpenAI launches GPT-4, an even more powerful model, and in parallel announces ChatGPT Plus. OpenAI priced it at $20 a month, faster response times, and early access to new features. And this subscription is an instant success. Within a year, ChatGPT has over 15 million paying subscribers. That's over $300 million in ARR, just from subscriptions. But the bigger result is this. ChatGPT changes the narrative around AI. Before ChatGPT, AI was this abstract thing that might happen someday. But after ChatGPT, AI is a thing that everyone's using right now. Not future tense anymore. It's happening right now. And all of a sudden, Sam becomes the face of the AI revolution. He testifies before Congress. He meets with world leaders. He's on the cover of Time magazine. He's one of the most influential people in technology. This launch was Sam's bet that experience beats performance. GPT 3.5 wasn't even the best model at the time. It was just good enough, wrapped in an interface that anyone could use. And it worked. Fast forward a little bit more. By mid-2024, ChatGPT has 400 million weekly active users. By mid-2025, it's 800 million. It's one of the 10 most visited websites in the world. And here's the crazy part. Sam's engineers were right. It was just GPT 3.5 with a chat interface. But what the engineers did get wrong was that this matters. Sometimes the interface is everything. And that's a lesson that goes way beyond AI. That's a lesson about how the world actually works. But this journey wasn't a smooth one for Sam, far from it. So let's dig into why that is. All right, final inflection point. It's November 16, 2023. OpenAI is at its absolute peak. ChatGPT is the fastest growing app ever. The company's valued at $80 billion. Sam has become one of the most recognizable faces in technology. Everything looks perfect. Everything looks like it's working. Everything looks like success. But behind the scenes, there's tension. The board of OpenAI is worried, and I mean genuinely worried. They think Sam is moving too fast. They think he's prioritizing growth over safety. There are concerns that he's not being fully transparent about what's happening inside the company. That he's making decisions without them, that he's become too powerful. Ilya Sutskever, OpenAI's co-founder and chief scientist, has been documenting Sam's behavior for over a year. He's written a 52-page memo accusing Sam of a consistent pattern of lying, undermining his execs, and pitting his execs against one another. He says that Sam told him and Mira Marathi, the CTO, conflicting things about how the company would be run. Different stories, different promises. Sutskever talks to the other board members, Helen Toner, Tasha McCauley, Adam D'Angelo. They're all nervous. They think Sam is too powerful, too focused on commercialization, and not focused enough on safety. On Thursday, November 16th, Sam gets a text from Ilya, asking him to join on a Google Meet the next day. And at that time, Sam has no other reason but to think that this is a routine meeting. So it's now Friday, November 17th, midday. Sam joins the Google Meet, and the board tells him, "You're fired. Effective immediately. You're off the board, and Mira Marathi is the new interim CEO." So Sam naturally asks why. And they say, "You are not consistently candid in your communications with the board." That's it. No specifics, no details, just you're out. Greg Brotman, OpenAI's president and Sam's closest ally, gets a separate message. "You're off the board too, but you can stay as president, reporting to Mira." So naturally, Greg says, "Screw that, I'm resigning." Within an hour, OpenAI posts a blog announcing Sam's departure, and the tech world explodes. Twitter is on fire. No one understands what's just happened. So here is where the board makes a massive miscalculation. They thought that they could fire Sam cleanly, install Mira, move on, get back to business. But they didn't anticipate three things that would cascade and destroy their plan. First, Microsoft is furious. They've just invested $13 billion into OpenAI. $13 billion. They bet their entire AI strategy on this partnership. And they get the news at the same time as everyone else, through Twitter. Satya Nadella, Microsoft CEO, finds out that his company's $13 billion investment just had its leader removed, and he wasn't even consulted. So by Sunday, something happens. Over 500 of OpenAI's 770 employees sign a letter, threatening to quit and join Microsoft unless Sam is reinstated. 500 out of 770. That's nearly 65% of the company. Most people who get fired go home. They sulk, they call a lawyer, they disappear from the public eye. But Sam doesn't do that. Within hours of being fired, he starts negotiating his return. And again, here's where Sam's incredible resourcefulness kicks in at a level most people have never seen. So it's Friday night. Sam's in shock, but he's already talking to people about what's next. Investors are calling him. Founders are calling him. The ecosystem is gathering around him. So now it's Saturday. Sam and the board start negotiating his return. But the board is divided. Some people want him back, some don't. The discussions go late into the night. Nobody is sleeping. So now it's Sunday. The negotiations break down. The board appoints someone called Emmett Shear, the former CEO of Twitch, as the new interim CEO, replacing Mira. This feels like a betrayal because Mira was supposed to be the temporary. Now she's out too. Nobody trusts the process. It's now Sunday night, late Sunday night. And Satya Nadella announces that Microsoft is hiring Sam and Greg to lead a new advanced AI research team at Microsoft. This is Nadella's power play. If OpenAI won't give Sam back, Microsoft will take him and Greg too, and the whole thing fractures. Now we're at Monday morning, and the employee revolt goes nuclear. Over 500 employees sign the letter, and that letter is brutal. It says, "Your actions have made it obvious that you are incapable of overseeing OpenAI. We, the undersigned, may choose to resign from OpenAI and join the newly announced Microsoft subsidiary." And then something extraordinary happens. Ilya Sutskever, Ilya, who'd led the coup to fire Sam, who wrote the 52-page memo accusing him of lying, Ilya flips. He tweets, "I deeply regret my participation in the board's actions. I never intended to harm OpenAI. I will do everything I can to reunite the company." So here's what's important to understand. Sam doesn't win this through force. He doesn't have more power than the board. He doesn't outmaneuver them strategically in that moment. He won because he'd spent years, 15 years, building relationships. Every employee at OpenAI who signed that letter owed Sam something. He'd hired them, mentored them, protected them. The network he built at Combinator, the reputation he built at Loopt, the goodwill he built over 15 years, it all came due in one weekend. And on Tuesday, the board caves. Sam is reinstated as CEO. The board is reshuffled. Brett Taylor, former co-CEO of Salesforce, becomes chairman, Larry Summers joins, and there is only one original member who stays. Sam is back after 5 days, but he's not just back, he's stronger. The old board is gone. The employees are loyal. They've just proved it. Microsoft is even more invested. And Sam has just survived something that would have destroyed most people. Here's what this moment revealed, and here's the insight. Sam's superpower, it isn't technical skill or vision. It's not that he's the best coder or the smartest person in the room. His superpower is that he makes himself indispensable. When they tried to remove him, the entire company nearly collapsed. That's not luck. That's 15 years of relationship building paying off. That's understanding that power comes from people, not titles. That's making sure that everyone around you knows what you've done for them. And here's the other thing. Sam learned something from this. In a direct quote from an interview with Lex Fridman, he says, "It definitely changed how I think about default trust. I was an extremely trusting person. This was so shocking that it's changed me." He admits he's more cautious now, more paranoid. He trusted the board, and the board tried to remove him without warning. But he also says something else, something that surprised people. He says, a direct quote, "The dominant emotion of that weekend was love, not hate. Despite everything, despite the betrayal, despite the coup attempt, the dominant emotion was love. He felt supported by the people who mattered, the employees, the investors, the founders he'd helped over the years. The network came through. By early 2024, OpenAI is back to business. ChatGPT continues to grow. GPT-4 gets even better. And Sam, he's untouchable now. He survived a coup, got rehired by popular demand, came out more powerful than before. And here's what I want you to understand about all this. When Paul Graham said that Sam has such force of will that he's going to get what he wants, this is what he means. This moment, this weekend. It's not that Sam is aggressive or manipulative. He understands how systems work. He understands that organizations are made of people, and he spent 15 years building deep relationships with people. When the moment of truth came, when someone tried to take him down, all those relationships activated at once. That is power. That's real power. And that's a lesson that goes way beyond OpenAI. Okay, so we've walked through 5 massive turning points in Sam Altman's life. Loopt, Y Combinator, OpenAI, ChatGPT, the firing and reinstatement. So now let's step back and talk about what's really going on here. What are the patterns? What makes his decision-making and strategic thinking so different from everyone else? I see 3 big things. Sam is relentlessly resourceful to the point where it becomes his unfair advantage. Think about the Loop story, trying 30 different paths into a mobile carrier until one finally works. An exec literally tells him, "I'm meeting with you because I want you to stop bothering us." And Sam takes that as a win because he understands something most people don't. Persistence is an underrated superpower. Or look at the OpenAI firing. Within 48 hours, he has Microsoft offering him a job. 500 employees threatening to quit. The board negotiating his return. Most people try once, maybe twice. They get rejected or they get tired. But Sam keeps trying until the problem bends to his will. Most people stop after the first ignored email, but Sam doesn't. Most people stop after the first no, but Sam sees that as a data point, not a death sentence. He tries 30 different paths, 50 if he has to. So the takeaway here for founders listening is that it's not about being the smartest person in the room or the most talented. It's about being the most persistent in finding a way through. Second, Sam plays a different game than everyone else. He's optimizing for leverage, not immediate outcomes. Look at his decision to become president of Y Combinator. Most people in his position would have thought, I should just go start another company and go for a massive exit. But Sam saw something different. He saw that being president of YC gave him access to hundreds of founders every single year. It gave him the ability to shape the next generation of startups. It gave him a platform to build relationships at scale. That's leverage. Not immediate money, not immediate prestige, but leverage. The ability to make things happen, the ability to influence hundreds of companies, and the ability to compound relationships over time. Same calculation with OpenAI. Most people would have stayed at Y Combinator. It was the most powerful position in startup land. Guaranteed influence, guaranteed access, guaranteed deal flow. But Sam saw that OpenAI, if it worked, would be civilization scale, not billion-dollar startup scale, civilization scale. So he left guaranteed influence for uncertain but potentially infinite leverage. Here's the question Sam seems to be asking himself at every inflection point. What is the highest leverage move I can make? Not what's the safest move, not what's going to make me look the best right now, but what position do I want to be in 5 years from now? And what move today gets me closest to that? That's a very different optimization function than what most people use. Third, and this might be the most important one, Sam understands that relationships are the ultimate compounding asset. Every single inflection point in his story comes down to relationships. He gets into Y Combinator because Paul Graham likes him. He becomes president of YC because Graham trusts him. He survives the OpenAI firing because 500 employees chose him over the board. But here's what's subtle, and it's what most people miss. Sam didn't build these relationships by being transactional. He built them by being genuinely helpful, by taking care of people, by being generous with advice and introductions. He understands at a deep level that the relationships you invest in are the dividends you get paid later. As he writes in one of his essays, one of the best ways to build a network is to develop a reputation for really taking care of the people who work with you. That's exactly what he did. And when it mattered, when the board tried to fire him, those relationships were the thing that saved him. Not his technical skills, not his intelligence, not his vision for AI, but the fact that people wanted him to win because he'd invested in them. He'd helped them. He'd built goodwill that compounded over 15 years. So here's what keeps coming back to me about Sam Altman's story. It's not about being the best. It's not about being the smartest or the most technically skilled. It's about being the person who stays in the game long enough for the game to change in your favor. Sam dropped out of Stanford to build a company that sold for $43 million. It's good, but not a great outcome when you're talking about the standards of elite entrepreneurs. Most people would have looked at that and said, that's a pretty decent outcome. But Sam looked at it differently. He said, I've now built relationships with the best people in Silicon Valley. I've learned how to operate at scale. I've earned credibility. Now I'm in the game. He became president of Y Combinator, not because he'd run the most successful startup, but because Paul Graham saw something in him, a relentless resourcefulness, a willingness to do whatever it took to make things work. He turned OpenAI from a nonprofit into a real company, not because he had the best technical vision, but because he understood leverage better than anyone else. He knew the nonprofit structure wouldn't allow them to compete, so he changed the structure. He launched ChatGPT not because his engineers thought it was a good idea. They didn't. He launched it because he had this intuition. People want to talk to AI, and he was right. And he survived getting fired because he'd spent 15 years building relationships, creating goodwill, and making himself indispensable. That's the pattern. Sam doesn't win by being the best. He wins by being relentlessly resourceful, by optimizing for leverage instead of immediate outcomes, and by building relationships that compound over time to build the most valuable startup in history. Thank you for joining us on Inflection Moments. If today's story sparked a new perspective or challenged your thinking, be sure to share it with someone you know loves this stuff as much as you and I do. Maybe it's a college buddy, your water cooler buddy, or maybe even someone in the family group chat. If you enjoyed this deep dive, make sure to leave a 5-star review and subscribe to our channels so you can be the first one to hear what we've got coming next. And if you're interested in insights, ideas, and lessons from some of the world's greatest entrepreneurs, sign up for our newsletter. The link is in the show notes. Until next time, keep building and talk soon.